Good evening and welcome to another Wednesday night study. Before I start, let me give you the announcement that I've been giving you for the last couple weeks. There's a lot of excitement growing for our Thursday night study. It's going to happen at 119, St. Vincent's 119, right on 119 Road near 280. It's going to be at 6:30 on Thursday night starting June 1st. And a lot of excitement. Seems like a lot of people are going to be coming, so we want to invite you, if you're anywhere near, to come to that. All right, let's go right into In the News tonight. And May 10th, 2023. Let me go with economy. Homeless encampments explode all over America as rent soars and evictions surge. Look at this picture. That is a homeless camp. Communities all over the United States are being taken over by giant homeless encampments. But we are supposed to believe that this is perfectly normal. The Biden administration is trying very hard to convince all of us that the economy is in fine shape, even though many of our most prominent corporations are currently conducting massive layoffs. If you know anything about the Biden administration, I'll throw my 2 cents in here, maybe 5 cents. It's a lying administration. I think it should be known as that. I don't know of any truth that comes out of this organization or any of their press conferences or anything. So this is another lie. Just like in 2008 and 2009, large numbers of people have lost their jobs or their businesses are ending up living on the streets. And as a result, homeless encampments have soared all across America. In fact, one of the largest homeless encampments is in Marion County near San Francisco. It's now more than 2 miles long, a homeless encampment. Hundreds of locals in one of San Francisco's wealthiest counties have been forced to pack up their lives into RVs and trailers after being pushed out of the housing market. Shocking photos show the ever-growing line of trucks and other vehicles along 101 highway, which now stretches over 2 miles in one of the largest encampments in the country. The Federal Reserve knew that pumping vast amounts of money into the system would make the wealthy even wealthier, but they also hoped that some of that wealth would eventually trickle down to the poor. Sadly, that hasn't happened. Instead, the gap between the wealthy and the poor has gotten larger and larger than it's ever been before. And now we're witnessing scenes like this all over the nation. Those that live there are trying to make the best of it. In fact, one woman that recently moved in is comparing it to heaven. Shelley, 53, moved to Binford Road from Petaluma at the beginning of April to join her friend Terry. Shelley was seated under a covered area behind a green vehicle and held her small dog Bailey as she talked to the Post. Here's what she said. "This is right here. This is heaven," she went on. "No, you're not living in heaven. You are a 53-year-old and you're living in a vehicle on this side of the road." Of course, she's far from alone. More than 500,000 Americans are currently homeless, and that number is inevitably going to grow much larger. Unfortunately, it's now become nearly impossible to escape this crisis in some cities. At this point, the entire city of Portland is essentially one enormous homeless encampment. You heard me right, the entire city. And countless businesses have fled for greener pastures as a result. Yes, some of the people living in these homeless encampments are drug addicts and criminals, but there's also a lot of hardworking individuals that just have had some tough luck. These days, most of the population is barely scraping from month to month, and inflation has pushed housing costs to absurdly high levels. Americans are facing one of the toughest markets in years. In New York City, I can't believe this, but I'm going to read it to you. In New York City, the average rent of a one-bedroom apartment has now reached $5,000 a month. One-bedroom apartment. Can you imagine paying $5,000 a month for an apartment with just one bedroom? That's insanity. The line outside Boston's American Red Cross food pantry on a recent morning stretched the length of 2 football fields. It's a hunger cliff. Inflation and ending these emergency allotments people are really crashing. About 32 million Americans had their monthly food stamp benefits cut at the end of February, on an average about $90 per person, though some households experienced much deeper reductions. Some 24.6 million adults didn't have enough to eat in early April versus 16.7 million the same month 2 years ago, the Census Bureau has told us. You're in America, you're talking about people in poverty and starving to death. But thanks to the Federal Reserve, this is our country now. And as economic conditions deteriorate, the number of Americans that are getting booted out of their rentals has been soaring. All told, landlords filed nearly almost 1 billion eviction cases across the sites that they tracked in ETS, which is a tracking instrument, an increase of 78.6% compared to 2021. Those that are running things are not going to be able to fix this. In the months ahead, many more Americans will lose their jobs, and many more Americans will get evicted from their homes. Let me tell you this as I sum up, not in the article, but my own words. So Joe Biden is supposedly running for president again. Let me be very clear. A vote for Joe Biden is a sure giveaway that someone who's voting for him is brain dead. They must be if they vote for him. Let me give you a little bit more talking about the economy. Obviously, you've heard this week about the debt ceiling. Biden is going all over the globe to Ireland and refusing to talk about it. He sat down with the majority leader in the House just yesterday and still hasn't resolved anything. So I'm going to show you a couple charts that actually one chart. The debt ceiling. Here's the title of this article. Economist estimates exact date U.S. will run out of cash for the debt ceiling. The U.S. will run out of cash to pay all the government bills on time on June 8th, according to Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics. It's very clear that the April tax revenues came in very weakly, about a third of what we took in last year, but don't know quite why. What the revenue numbers are going to look like in the coming days is anybody's guess. June 8th will be the day when the Treasury can't pay its bills. A best case scenario will be August 8th. So there's your window. Gives you a sense of the timing. The Treasury General Accountant being depleted just means that we have another partial government shutdown. That's what we'll have, like we've had so many times in the past. The U.S. may potentially default on its debt as early as June 1st if Congress does not raise or suspend the debt limit before that time. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said in a letter Monday to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California. So what's the deal? Well, McCarthy wants to cut expenses, which I think we need to do, and get pass a budget and pass a ceiling. Biden wants no restrictions. He wants nothing cut, and he wants to be able to continue to spend money as much as he possibly can. The U.S. House of Representatives on April 26 passed the Limit, Save, Grow Act of 2023 as the debt ceiling debate continues in the nation's capital. Now, the Senate has the opportunity to vote on the bill, which aims to limit federal spendings, save taxpayers' dollars, and grow the economy. They will not vote for it. Given Democrats' control of the Senate, it's unlikely that bill will pass in its current form. And Biden isn't budging. Again, he wants an unlimited debt ceiling. Let me show you the national debt. This is something that's absolutely amazing. When I first started doing in the news way back in 1990, our national debt was somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 trillion. That's right about here in this chart, $4 trillion. Now it's approaching, it is $30 trillion. There is no way in heaven or earth or any other place that they're ever going to pay this thing off. And now he wants to do more. Why? Because it's great politics if you can give money out to everybody. The Democrats, and let me just give you a thumbnail understanding that Democrats want to sell the farm. They want to give everything the farm has, not sell. They want to give everything the farm has. Republicans want to say, wait a second, let's be able to work for these things and build assets. And so Republicans generally believe in a limited government. And Democrats believe in a very open, wide, large government. Whenever you do that, it's bordering on socialism. So we don't have to tell you about socialism and how it's taking over America. And so Biden wants to do that again. And let me tell you something, just look at the history of socialism in any country on the planet. It doesn't work. A perfect modern example is Venezuela. Venezuela, they're fleeing that country in mass because they can't afford to eat bread. And so that's what socialism does. And unfortunately, America is heading down that path. Let me give you one more for in the economy. And this one's one that you need to listen to because, and I know you do, but because you're going to hear this more and more. It's called BRICS. It's a conglomeration of nations. And let me tell you what they're up to. Dawn of a new alliance of nations as U.S. power fades across the globe. You may have heard the term BRICS. I've spoken to you many times before when reading about world affairs and wondering what it was all about. So as we watch the American dollar and economy lose power on the world stage, this alliance could quickly move to take its place, especially as other countries that used to be allied with us move over into this bloc. BRICS is a union we should watch, as there are several large, very large economic powers involved that aren't exactly friends of the United States of America. What is BRICS? It's an economic alliance that has been around since about 2001. It represents the original countries, Brazil, here's the acronym, Brazil, Russia, India, China. By 2010, South America had been added, bringing the current acronym BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America are ranked among the world's fastest growing emerging market economies for years. Economic power would bring political power. This is a one world economy, and these nations look like they're in a formulation to be able to bring that about. BRICS now is expanding, and this is the one I really want to focus on. For many years, the United States has been a primary global economic power. The reserve currency is the dollar. I've told you this before, China can't buy oil unless they convert their yuans into dollars. But that is going out the window. As our star shines a little less brightly due to our economic difficulties, poor governmental management, and less than stellar relationships with several other countries, BRICS seems poised to step into the position that our nation once held. So what countries are involved in BRICS? I told you the first five: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But the Union seems intent on expanding, and other nations are in the midst of an application process. Multiple countries have asked to become a part of the bloc. And by the way, they are right now, these are the nations I'm going to read to you that have already filled out applications to join BRICS. It's staggering. Algeria, Argentina, Bahrain, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Pakistan, Senegal, Sudan, Syria, Thailand, Tunisia, Turkey, Uruguay, Venezuela, and Zimbabwe. These are the nations right now that have already filed an application. Original nations are meeting in South Africa on June 2nd and 3rd to discuss the expansion and bringing these other nations in. I'm telling you, this is a horrendous scenario that's happening. So why do we care about BRICS? Well, not a great deal has been mentioned about this in the news, but I believe that such a union is a very troubling sign. A lot of these nations aren't friendly with the United States in the first place. A former alliance between countries like China and Russia and India and Iran is troubling, particularly as our government has instituted brutal sanctions in the past. BRICS member states account for over 40% of the global population. That's just the five right now, and around a quarter of the global GDP. The interest from Global South nations to join the bloc comes at a time when more and more governments move away from the US dollar. The greenback has become more unreliable for dollarized economies due to rising interest rates regulated by the US Federal Reserve and the bank's weaponization of the dollar through financial sanctions. We have used the dollar to punish countries, and now they're saying it's not going to happen anymore. So sides are being chosen. The United States has powerful enemies, and that's not even including the ones within our own borders who seem intent on destroying the very fabric of our culture. For our entire lives, the United States has been on the top of the global pyramid. One must wonder, when rivals begin to group together, how long we will keep that position. The expansion of the BRICS alliance is extremely important to watch. We always think that we have time, but it looks like the presumed time is actually running out. Let's go on to the category of war. And all these categories, by the way, are what Jesus has talked about. That you'll hear of wars, rumors of wars. A one world economy is what John the Revelator talked about. So all these categories I've been giving you from week to week are based on prophecy, and that's why I give them to you, so that you can see how prophecy is being fulfilled. This one is drone wars. It says you haven't seen anything yet. Last week's drone attack on the Kremlin, if you didn't know, the Kremlin was attacked by drones last week, a swarm of drones. Putin supposedly was suggesting an attempt assassination on the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Of course, they blamed the United States. We denied it. They blamed Ukraine. They didn't say anything. With multiple parties blaming one another for the attack, it shows how easy it can be to hide one's identity during a drone attack. You can't tell where these came from. Again, the U.S. has denied Russian claims that it masterminded the attack, while Ukraine has not entirely denied being responsible for the attack, but suggested it was staged by Russia itself in order to escalate the war. The basic idea of a drone swarm is that its machines are able to make decisions among themselves. Let me get off this article and tell you what they do. They send out 1,000 drones, about the size of my hands expanded. 1,000 work in unison with AI, artificial intelligence. They're able to make decisions on the spot. So if there's some fire coming at them, which would be You'd have to really be able to pinpoint and hit them. Even if they hit one and take out the one that's leading the attack, another would take over. Or if they see something else that deters them, they could actually make the decision themselves to be able to turn and attack something else. So the swarm continues its mission, even if it loses some drones during its mission. Some reports indicate that China has successfully tested a swarm of 1,000 drones. One swarm coming at. And China appears to be interested in swarm capability as a method of attacking U.S. aircraft carriers. Now, why would that be efficient? Because U.S. aircraft carriers have missiles on it that are able to take down planes. They have nothing that could take down drones. If a missile went through 1,000 drones, it may take out 20 of them. The rest of them would continue on their mission. So drone swarms are consistently able to get past ship defenses that are geared towards, again, shooting down single planes. This weakness means it makes sense to attack an enemy ship with a large number of cheap drones rather than one single missile costing about $1 million to $2 million. Thousands of drones would strike by air, they'd strike by land and water to destroy enemy defenses. But experts fear humans could lose control of the drones. Small drones would be equipped with weapons and tools for navigation and communication, along with abilities ranging from radar jamming to launching lethal attacks. Speaking on a panel at Cornell University last year, U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Paul Lushenko said, quote, "Drones can aid, they can watch, and they can kill." As the swarms grow in size, it'll become virtually impossible for humans to manage their decisions. Autonomy and AI will be needed to make those decisions. A massive drone swarm prone to errors would be a terrifying thing, a new weapon of mass destruction. Can you imagine, if you read in the news, I pray we don't, that a swarm of drones are headed towards the Capitol? The Capitol right now has a lot of machine guns that are on top of the roof. They have snipers that are there, and they're looking to thwart conventional attacks. They are not prepared for a drone strike. And so if a drone strike comes like it did for the Kremlin, it could be devastating for the Capitol. Let me go a little bit further and give you a little bit about religion under what's going to happen there. Again, we know a one world religion is coming, and we know that some of these articles are pushing towards that. We also know that there's false religions that are out there that Jesus warned us about, and false antichrists. This one says, Islam grown as the West sleeps, more practicing Muslims than Catholics in France. For the first time ever in modern history, there are more practicing Muslims in France than practicing Catholics. This unprecedented civilization change has been like a frog slowly boiling in hot water, as most of the West has been both ignorant and apathetic, yet has profound significance all over Europe. The report from INSEE, a French National Institute of Statistics, reports that between the ages of 18 and 59, 1.5 million Catholics pray and 800,000 go to church, while, watch this, 2 million Muslims pray and another 800,000 go to church on a regular basis. The Muslim religion has been on the rise for decades and now accounts for 10% of the total population in most big cities. It's 20 to 30%. I remember when I first got saved, there was a handbook called Halley's Handbook of Religion, and they were talking about the cult Islam. And at that time, there weren't many Islamics in Europe. And they said that Islam is going to take over civilization one of two ways, either by the sword or by overpopulation. And we're watching that happen right now. 65% of practicing Catholics are over 50 years old. They're ready to die. You're not ready to die when you're over 50. I just mean that they're older. In contrast, 73% of practicing Muslims are under the age of 30. This is a population that's going to continue to overtake Europe. Already, there are Catholic institutions and churches that are abandoned or taken over by mosques. In 1976, France had 150 mosques. Listen to this statistic. They had 900 in 1985, 1,555 in 2001. And it's a dramatic progression. Today, an Algerian novelist, Boulaim Sensal, says there are 3,000 mosques. At the end of this century, there will be 10,000. Secularization is proceeding quickly only for Catholics. Catholics are getting woke. They're getting into the secularization of their religion. Muslims, on the other hand, Muslim immigrants, are not becoming woke. The postmodernist virus has not corroded their minds. 91% of Muslims educated as Muslims remain Muslims. They remain religious, even after 2 generations. The use of the veil for women is also increasing from 18 to 29% of all women in France in just 10 years. This demographic power was highlighted by late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, who said in 2006, quote, "We have 50 million Muslims in Europe. There are signs that Allah will grant Islam victory in Europe. Without swords, without guns, without conquest. We'll turn into a Muslim continent within a few decades." And man, he is not too far off from his prediction. Let me give you a little bit more about religion. So in the meantime, we watch Christianity continue to be pushed down in America, continue to be made fun of, and continue to be delegated to something that shouldn't be spoken in public. Listen to this. What does it mean when politicians literally hide the Bible? On Monday, state legislators in Arizona filed an ethics complaint against State Representative Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. Can you guess what party she's from? She's a Democrat. After she was caught on tape hiding Bibles in the House Lawmakers Lounge. Disrespectful acts towards Holy Scripture that take place at the state capitol building are far more serious than that. And it is good to see that lawmakers who filed the complaint recognize it. It's not a separation of church and state. Lawmakers are able to have lounges, and in those lounges, they can have any religious item they want. To hide that is pretty amazing. The ethics complaint against Stahl Hamilton stated that she engaged in disorderly behavior, potentially committed repeated acts of theft. She didn't do it once, she did it several times, and created a hostile work environment, which demonstrates a lack of respect for other members of the legislature, of the staff, visitors, and their property, and the rule of law. Stahl Hamilton's actions were said to be contrary to the rules of good order and decorum, and deeply offensive to the public sense of morality. Indeed. At the end of March, Arizona Capitol Security was informed that 2 Bibles, which resided in a private house members' lounge, were missing. Officers later discovered the Bibles under couch cushions in the same room. A week later, one of the Bibles disappeared again, and it was discovered inside a refrigerator in a shared kitchen. Due to the incidents, Capitol Security installed a security camera in the room. You're looking at that picture right now. That's from the security camera to find out what was happening to the Bibles. Not long after, they realized that she was taking them. The claim that Stahl Hamilton said she was playing a prank, and that's laughable. The way she anxiously looked around to see no one was watching her before she quickly and conspicuously was hiding a Bible is far from a gleeful act of a prankster. They are the nervous movements of a wrongdoer. Stahl Hamilton had hid the Bibles 3 times. What about the sights of Bibles made Stahl Hamilton so annoyed and uncomfortable as to cover them up so you shouldn't have to see them? Look, from President George Washington to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, they have looked to the Bible for inspiration. At a 1983 National Prayer Breakfast, President Ronald Reagan said on the Bible, quote, "Inside its pages lie all the answers to all the problems that man has ever known," end of quote. Sadly, such attitudes of Stahl seem increasingly common among America's political class. Hamilton's public controversy should remind Arizona state legislatures about the importance of religious freedom and the value of reading the Bible. As I continue on tonight, let me give you this one. This one's shocking. Baylor University in Texas is a Christian university. But listen to what's happening there. World's largest Baptist university hosts Queer Sex Ed Night. Founded in 1845 and claiming 16,000 students, Baylor University is the world's largest Baptist university and also one of the oldest. It is the oldest perpetually operated university in the state of Texas. But despite its long history of being faithful to its scriptures, their board of regents thought a little leaven wouldn't ruin the whole batch, and that appears to be what is currently happening at the school. Now, Baylor's board wants to accept LGBTQ plus values by backing an LGBTQ student group called PRISM. If Baylor wishes to be a Christian university, it cannot affirm LGBTQ plus identity in any way, shape, or form. Sexual immorality and denial of God's design and creation are not compatible with following Christ. You cannot serve both Christ and sexual immorality. You have to choose. But Baylor's board apparently thinks they can have both. They're wrong. If you split the baby, you kill it. And that's what Baylor has done to Christian identity. What does it mean for Baylor? Well, the board approval of this student group is the death knell to their claim to be a Christian university. No one believes that claim anymore. The baby has been torn in two, and nothing short of a miracle can make it whole again. It took less than a year for its PRISM Club to host its first queer sex ed event, whose advertisements featured a Planned Parenthood logo. PRISM is clearly an alliance of mostly openly and unrepentant queer Christian students at Baylor that has brought in, and by the way, that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a Christian queer. I'll be honest with you. There's no such thing as a Christian LGBTQ. Either you're for God or you're against God. Either you understand his principles and you live by them, or you deny them. You can't be both. Baylor is brought into all lies of the culture and are eager to spread their beliefs in other students. Why would a Christian university allow a club that's very purpose is to promote a worldwide view that contradicts Scripture and the purpose for which the school was created in the first place? David Folks, Baylor student pro-life activist about Prism Queer Sex Ed event, said this: "This event is not aligned with biblical principles or values. It's a shame that this event is permitted to take place using university facilities and resources." Baylor's motto is Pro Ecclesia, Pro Texana, meaning that Baylor is supposed to be supporting, promoting, and upholding the universal church of the living God, a pillar and buttress of truth. Matter of fact, in some of its cornerstones, they have that verse scratched into it, 1 Timothy 3:15. This demonstrates that Baylor, through their permission of this event, is not caring for the pursuit of truth, beauty, and goodness, but rather for people-pleasing and acquiescence to the prevailing culturally derived moral standards. Folks also shared his thoughts on Baylor permitting and promotion of Planned Parenthood on its campus. He said Baylor should sever any connection with Planned Parenthood, should not permit any student organization to affiliate or partner with them. By allowing this, Baylor is either knowledgeably engaged with or is complicit in associating the largest Baptist university with the largest baby murdering organization. Baylor joins other faith-based schools in abandoning Scripture to appease woke students and teachers. So what's happening? Well, Christianity in America is going to be the villain. We're going to see it more and more. I talked about this 15, 20 years ago, that Christianity is going to be persecuted. And not only is it being persecuted on one side, as we see that the manifesto that still hasn't been released from the Tennessee killer, but it's also something that's going to be woke. It's going to be watered down. And so we're watching a Laodicean condition that John told us would happen at the end of time. And we're watching it. We're watching the church marry the world. And trust me, it's going to happen more and more and more. It's the hot potato. And I'm be honest with you, most pastors don't want to handle it. If you're a pastor and you're listening to me tonight, you got to talk about LGBTQ. You got to tell people, tell the congregation how wrong it is. God created male and female. That doesn't only say it in Genesis. Jesus quoted that verse. And so we need to be able to say it. It's a shame. It comes to my mind, there was a young boy, 12-year-old boy, went to school and said, "A man is a man and a woman is a woman" on his t-shirt. He got thrown out of school for saying something that was absolutely true, and not only true, but biblical. So we're watching it. It's going to get worse and worse. I wish it would get better, but it's not. Persecution's coming. And it's coming not only in our woke system. I'm sick and tired of hearing about LGBTQ, to be honest with you. I'm sick and tired of it. Less than 1% of the population is transgender. I'm sick of it. I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. We need to stand up and tell people what we believe and not be pressured to any of the woke garbage that's out there. Man, I'm going to get off on a tangent if I don't keep going. I'll give you a little bit about moral decay. Here you go, speaking of which. And let me just change this because I think I have this under another spot. But let me get to that so I can show you. This says, U.S. Navy hires non-binary drag queen influencer as recruitment plummets. I mean, where are their heads? So, when you use military and emphasize the military culture, any social cause other than being a lean, clean fighting machine, you turn it into a big social club. When a huge portion of time is spent in sensitivity training, for example, why would the gay flag be needed to be raised over a military base? I don't get that. It's an experiment. This is trendiness. This is an attempt to force up upon the military, which is under state control, by the way, a level of political correctness that is meant to radiate around the country. It's being pushed over and over. You can see it. The agenda is clear. The state government the government is pushing it everywhere they possibly can so that people will accept it. You push it on, people get tired of hearing it, just like I am, but I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to fight against it. The result of this state-enforced experiment, I have to tell you that those in uniform resent this, highly resent it. Because if they're in the military, what they want is to be proud, competent, strong, and part of an amazing fighting force that does good in the world. That's why they're there. They're soldiers who have spent more time in sensitivity training than in actual use of their weapons. That's not going to bode well for the future. It's not going to bode well for the motivation of these soldiers. Another Author Kay Faust noted that she reached out to the Navy Insider to ask about their recruitment problem. His response is revealing. Quote, "The Navy pivoted from recruiting the type of person with a natural inclination to serve to recruit a more diverse community. Thus, the people who would normally volunteer are either avoiding the military or they're resigning." In other words, showcasing non-binary drag queens is predictably driving down recruitment, as the sort of men who would ordinarily consider the military are turned off by the aggressive LGBT agenda. Now, I can understand if 90% of the American men were LGBTQ, then go for it. But I'm telling you, this is ridiculous. A case in point is the reaction of Robert O'Neill. You may remember him. He was a member of SEAL Team 6 who shot Osama bin Laden in the now famous raid into Pakistan. Here's what he tweeted. "All right," he tweeted, "the US Navy is now using an enlisted sailor drag queen as a recruiter." He said, "I'm done." This is America's finest. He said, "I'm done." He says, "China is going to destroy us." And in caps, he put this, "You got this, Navy. I can't believe I fought for this." And there's an expletive there. Based on the widespread reaction from other veteran U.S. service members, O'Neill is not alone. The U.S. Defense Department under Biden administration doesn't even seem to be bothered by this. Indeed, an official 2021 report found that, quote, "The U.S. Navy is too woke for war because of risk-averse, politically correct, control freak top brass." We cannot defend ourselves. We are more concerned with wokeness than we are with being ready. All right. New Biden policy promotes a woke social agenda using U.S. foreign assistance. It's everywhere. This agenda is pushed everywhere. Again, I'm going to reiterate, a vote for Biden means you're brain dead. This man is changing our country. And it's not him. He's a talking suit. The Democratic Party, the progressives are changing this. Whoever's pulling the strings for Biden does not have your best interest in mind in any way, shape, or form. I don't care how many $1,000s they mail to you from the government. By the way, they're mailing you my money and everybody who works for money. And so they're not doing it. They're not some beneficent purveyor of funds. That's not even their funds. So let me just go on. In March, the U.S. Agenda for International Development, it's called the USAID, released its new Gender Equality and Women Empowerment Policy. This new Biden policy represents a significant shift from USAID's gender policy released by the Trump administration in 2020. Rather than simply affirming the inherent worth and dignity of women and girls, the Biden administration's new policy devalues women and girls by exposing a radical gender ideology as well as overt sexualization by championing the global use of contraception and abortion, even for young girls. The Trump administration's policy was a model of how USAID can positively empower women and girls. It specifically did not define the word gender, but consistently referenced women and men. The policy offered a straightforward respect for and understanding of the unique biological differences between women and men. The agenda goes on even further tangent by making intersectionality one of its 7 guiding principles. Intersectionality is a term with foundations in critical theory that suggests a common equality of sorts for all, but undue oppression requires some to be uplifted due to discrimination. The policy is actually at odds with itself. The Biden administration's radical gender ideology stance actually degrades and marginalizes real women in favor of those pretending to be. How is that helping to empower women and girls around the globe? I have a question. Let me interrupt myself. On the subject, a little off the point. So transgenders want to be called by a certain thing. If you're a man and you are transgender, you want to be called by the pronouns for a woman. So let me ask this. If a man can call himself a woman and demands that, I know colleges that have minimum requirements of minorities. Colleges will take in so many blacks, so many Hispanics, so many Asians. What if I'm a white male and I fill out an application for a college and I associate as a black male? Will they have to accept me? I mean, if it's good on one side, it should be good on another side. That's the ridiculousness of this. You call yourself anything, but there are certain areas that you can't do that. So why would we allow that in sexual preferences? Let me go back to the article. In short, this directive by the Biden administration erases women. This new policy directly and fraudulently wastes United States taxpayers' money that Congress allocated to help women thrive and become catalysts for positive societal change. The strategy usurps the value many cultures place on womanhood and instead seeks to adversely and inappropriately alter the traditional family dynamics. And there you have it. Let me get right to the source. This is a demonic move because Satan hates the nuclear family. Break up the nuclear family and you break up everything. That's why you have men associating as women and women associating as men. Who pays for that? The nuclear family. Many Americans are unaware that the Biden administration uses their tax money to fund and compel radical social activism in developing countries around the world. They're not only trying to do this here, they're trying to do that around the world. I just told you about Islam. Islam does not accept this. No wonder why they'll accept an economic forum that brings them all together to go against America. We're the great Satan to them. And why are we the great Satan? Because we act like Satan. Our administration is the great Satan for the world. And Muslims who stay Muslim and true to their faith will reject this hand and foot. And so that's why we're watching these things happen. And it's not going to be a pretty sight towards the end of it. The Biden administration's activism in favor of radical progressive social policies fails miserably on both counts, but whether it's home or abroad. Let me tell you a little bit about the planet. In the meantime, we see some other things happening that are prophetic. We know about pestilences and droughts. All this was foretold before we get to the end times. So now there's a drought in Europe. This article says over a quarter of European continent is currently in drought, 1/4 of it, and summer hasn't even arrived yet. A key reservoir, this is from Politico, a key reservoir serving millions of Catalans is dwindling away. A conflict over water triggered clashes in France, where several villages can no longer provide their residents with tap water. Italy's largest river is already running low as late June. Rains expected in the coming weeks should help surface moisture, and crops will have little effect on groundwater. As the Spanish Prime Minister noted, drought is going to be one of the central political and territorial debates of our country over the coming years. France just experienced its driest winter in 60 years, and winter's low snowfall in Europe does not bode well for the coming summer months. A senior researcher at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research noted if there's not a lot of precipitation now, then a drought is essentially locked in. As if political climate in Europe is not tense enough, with the refugee crisis and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, many experts are predicting water wars, not oil wars, water wars in the future. Jesus warned that humanity would experience global conflict and dramatic lack of essential needs at the end of the age. You can read Revelation 6, 4-6 for that. So we should not underestimate the impact, a lack of accessible water could have on international relations. Thankfully, there's a future coming in which water scarcity will be a thing of the past. This will be a time when rain falls in due season and even the deserts will blossom as the rose. It's the millennium Isaiah talked about in chapter 35, verse 1. One last article, and this is also under Planet. This says this: growing concerns over massive tsunami potential for West Coast. Now, I don't want to be judgmental, but you know all of the wokeness that has gone on in Washington and Oregon and in California. These states have been the bellwether of everything coming on to America. The liberal left is everywhere there. And I've told people to get out of the Midwest, the far West. I've told them to start moving. They are moving, by the way. And I know they're beautiful areas, but this is woke all the way down the line. On top of that, they're almost poised for one of the biggest natural disasters America has ever seen. Listen to this article. And again, this is not from a Christian. There's much more going on in the water than we realize. According to Newsweek, over 19,000 new underwater volcanoes have been discovered. And we are being told that thousands more could still be found because of most of our ocean floors have not been mapped yet. Could all this seismic activity be the reason why ocean temperatures have been rising so rapidly? Maybe it's not because of global warming. Maybe it's because of the vents of these underwater volcanoes that spew out overheated water into our oceans. Starting in mid-March, data from the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, leaps dramatically from earlier recordings, follows lows of both Arctic and Antarctic sea ice this year. As a consequence, it tells our sea ice is melting. Well, that could be climate change is what they say, or maybe it's that our thermal volcanoes under our oceans are heating up our oceans. So, as a consequence, a large number of ocean heat waves are emerging around the globe, putting untold pressure on wildlife. We're not told this, we're just pushed the religion of climate change. Something unusual caused ocean temperatures to jump dramatically beginning mid-March of this year. They've jumped. Experts are on high alert amid fears a crack in the bottom of the ocean could trigger an apocalyptic earthquake. Let me tell you a little bit about the ocean. A scientist by the name of Wagner, in 1907, came up with what was called plate tectonics. He said the planet is like a baseball with seams around it. Those are tectonic plates. They move on each other and they slide, and that's how you get earthquakes. But they're deep underneath the oceans too. 3/5 of our planet is water. And so those tectonic plates are moving along with the volcanoes that are there, just to throw that in. So they've found a hole. The hole, just 50 miles off the coast of the US state of Oregon, is spewing hot liquid that scientists warned could spark a magnitude 9.0 earthquake with the potential to devastate the entire West Coast. This giant hole is actually being leaked tectonic lubricant, and loss of this tectonic lubricant can easily become a major issue. So what does that mean? Well, the hole is not only spewing out superheated water, but it's a lubricant that comes from deep in the magma part of the earth. That lubricant helps the friction on those two plate tectonics. So when that lubricant's gone, there's total friction. So once it pushes, then you're getting a massive earthquake. So without it, pressure beneath the Earth's crust can grow, leading to an unbelievably powerful earthquake. This leak is happening right along the Cascadia subduction zone, and an unbelievably powerful quake in that area would have the potential to create a very, very large tsunami. So do you remember the enormous tsunami that hit Japan a number of years ago? Well, we're talking about a tsunami that's coming that would absolutely dwarf that one. A magnitude 9.0 earthquake along the Cascadian subduction zone could cause a tsunami that would be up to 100 feet tall and that would travel at speeds of up to 600 miles an hour. When it does, it will send waves surging outward at initial speeds of about 600 miles an hour. Less than a half hour after the quake, they will inundate the coast to an elevation of 100 feet above sea level in some spots. More typically about 70 feet, depending on bathymetry and about tides and other factors. They'll sweep up buildings, trees, vehicles, and people. If you live directly on the West Coast, when the day arrives, you will never escape. You'll be dead as soon as it happens. So let's hope that day won't come time soon. Of course, we have seen quite a bit of seismic activity along the West Coast recently. About a week ago, there were 2 swarms of earthquakes in the Salton Sea area, a 4.5 magnitude in Southern California. It included nearly 50 tremors, reaching 3.7 magnitude, felt by 300 people. And one team of scientists in Southern California claims that they have detected more than 1,200 shallow quakes in the past 8 days. Not 8 weeks, not 8 months, in the past 8 days, 1,200 shallow quakes. So we're watching something formulate that we're not going to be able to stop. These shallow quakes were detected about 1 mile below the surface. That's very, 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 very close to the surface, which can build up and create pathways to more significant ruptures on the surface. Experts assure us it's just a matter of time before the big one strikes California. And experts also assure us that it's just a matter of time before a giant tsunami caused by an earthquake along the Cascadian subduction zone absolutely devastates most of Washington, most of Oregon, and most of Northern California. In fact, in each case, we're being told that we are extremely way overdue. So the clock is ticking. And one of these days, the good fortune of America and its West is going to run out. Man, I'd like to give you a lot of positive in the news, but to me, even though it sounds dire, that's positive to me because this has been predicted. And what's also been predicted on the edge of this is that once you see these things, look up because your redemption draws. I believe Christ is coming back any moment. We have everything focused on it. You'll hear me say that over and over again. By the way, of the 5 crowns that are given to Christians, one of them is expecting Christ's return. So we need to be conscious of the fact that Christ is coming back and expect his return. It's the only way out for humanity, not us, for all of humanity.